And welcome back to the Legal Law channel, where we talk about everything that is law. So today we're going to talk about the social welfare appeal system for Irish citizens. So suppose to get a social welfare payment, you must apply for it first, and then I suppose if you're denied, which sometimes you are, reported in some of the papers, 56% of the time people are being denied social welfare payments such as disability, carers allowance, so forth. And so there is an appeal system in place that you should know. And if you think you were wrongly refused a social welfare payment, you can ask the Department of Social Welfare itself to review its own decision, and this will be sent to a different officer within the department where the decision will be reviewed. So it is important to note that the Social Welfare Appeals Office and the appeal system doesn't deal with all appeals. So for some payments like Supplementary Welfare Allowance Scheme, it does not deal with social welfare appeals. The additional needs payment does not deal with social welfare appeals. Once-off payments, no good neither. Back to clothing and footwear allowance, can't appeal it. Fuel allowance is a separate agency to the Department of Social Welfare, so that would not be subject to an appeal either. When you make an appeal to these official bodies, well, it is good to put your PPS number maybe on headed paper, and also time, maybe, or not even the time, but the date that the appeal was made, because you do have 21 days. Also, a certificate of postage might be a good idea, or sent by registered post, so therefore you have proof that you did send it. So you can also send it by email as well, and the email address can be found on the social welfare website. So first off, I suppose, what should you put in your appeal? Well, you should explain why you disagree with the decision. Also, you should provide supporting documentation of proof of what information you think you need, like I suppose maybe a doctor's letter, a local community nurse letter, well, anything that you think is relevant to your case. So that would be good if you could put that in the letter, maybe even to get your GP to write a letter if it need be. And that all this helps your appeal, and fresh information is considered in the appeal, so that's a good point to note. And you can also submit your appeal using mywelfare.ie. If you have a verified MyGov account for appeal, you can submit your appeal this way also. So suppose that your appeal then is about disability payment. Well, what happens with the appeal? It's reviewed, the decision is reviewed. In some cases, new evidence is examined by a social welfare inspector or a medical assessor, and if the appeal is about an illness or disability related payment, which I already said. So that's why it might be a good idea to get more specialist or doctor's letters to prove that you have a disability and you are entitled to this benefit. So that's a very interesting thing to note. Also, maybe with carers allowance, for example, that you are a carer, the person needs full-time care, part-time care, or the case may be, you should maybe see the community health nurse, and I suppose they can maybe give you a supporting document to say that that person does need care for, and that might help your appeal. And under Irish legal grounds of fair procedures, a person might be entitled to an oral hearing. And what is this about an oral hearing? Well, you can request an oral hearing from social welfare, and you can go alone or you can bring somebody for support. If you do get a solicitor or barrister services, well then it's at your expense. But you can have someone to act on your behalf also at an oral hearing. So if you have somebody that's a legal expert, kind of like myself, well, they can represent you at an appeal and they can talk for you. And the person is called a representative. But you must ask the Social Welfare Appeals Officer for permission if you do bring a representative to act on your behalf. So suppose you can even get a representative from the Citizens Information Service, or even a Welfare Rights Service, or it could be a friend, family member who wants they're over 18. This is permissible once the Social Welfare Appeals Office agrees to such. And how are the oral hearings heard? Well, usually they're heard in person, but sometimes they can be heard over the phone. So you can also go higher again if this appeal is refused by the Social Welfare Office. You can appeal to the Chief Appeals Officer in Dublin. And what is this about? Now, I suppose it will be also important to note that what does the Appeals Office decide in the Chief Appeals Office? Well, they decide the grounds of your appeal include any documentation that you did provide, the reports of the Department of Social Protection, their investigating officers and medical assessors report. They have a look at the submissions of the DSP, deciding officer, Department of Social Protection's officer that is, who made the original decision. They look at any emerging facts from the presentation or evidence that you may have given during the oral hearing. And after that, if you're not happy with that, well, you can appeal even further. You can appeal to the Office of the Ombudsman. So if you disagree with the final decision of the Social Welfare Appeals Officer, you can ask the Office of the Ombudsman to examine your case, and the Ombudsman can examine complaints about the actions of the Social Welfare Appeals Officer and investigate complaints about the everyday administrative activities of the Social Welfare Appeals Office. Now, if you're not happy with this, you can still appeal further. If that's not the end of it, you have more appeals and more appeals and more appeals. So you have grounds and rights, and we're here to tell you all of them. So you can appeal the decision to the High Court on a point of law, or you can seek judicial review in the High Court if you think the appeal was not fairly conducted. You should get legal advice in this situation, and I highly recommend that you do get legal advice if you go this far. You might need to get a barrister, junior counsel or senior counsel, whichever the case may be. Junior counsel is a barrister, an apprentice barrister. Senior counsel is of 10 years standing, so he's a very experienced barrister. Or else you may just wish to engage the services of a normal solicitor, or else that's the way to go, I suppose. But if you do take judicial review of the case, well, you have to do so swiftly enough, because judicial review applications have to be made pretty swiftly, and they're a matter of importance, so usually they're heard pretty quick. But how it's dealt with is usually oral submissions are made to the High Court by your barrister and your solicitor, or one or the other, but usually you won't have to appear yourself, but sometimes maybe you will, but usually it's just documentation evidence, and then you can get a decision by the court. If the court decides in your favour, then to give you an order of certiorari, which means they squash the decision of the appeals officer, and therefore your appeal succeeds. Now, the Social Welfare Appeals Office can make an award to a representative as such as a solicitor if they accompany you to the oral hearing. So it's at their discretion, I suppose. I know I did say that they don't usually, and which they don't, but it is still at their discretion, maybe based on the merits of the appeal and maybe how a person's representative, if they have a disability, they may need for a representative because they might be able to speak for themselves, which is highly understandable. So look, I hope you found this information useful. In law, I know, can be boring sometimes, but look, we all face legal scenarios in life, and it is good to know, have some knowledge, because everybody's entitled to representation and rights that can't speak for themselves, like persons with disabilities. So that's why I bring this channel to people, because it's good to represent the underrepresented and people that can't represent themselves, to know that there is an appeal system there is people to help you. So there you go. So the next video is going to be about metal detecting in Ireland. Is it legal? Is it not? We'll see. But we're going to be out and about as opposed to here in the room. We're going to get some good clips outside. So that's all to look forward to. Do subscribe. Thank you.